Hey everybody, it's me Ashish, and before we begin, I just want to give a quick thank you to everybody listening, watching, and supporting the podcast. It means the world to us, and we're so appreciative. I just want to let you guys know that you guys can always ask us questions, give us segment ideas, and keep up with the fun, all at AshishandFriends.com. We're on Twitter at AshishandPals, we're on Instagram at AshishandFriends, and hey, we're even on Facebook, facebook.com/AshishandFriendsPod. If you're watching this video, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to the channel. All that following and liking and subscribing will help us grow and keep going, so we appreciate it so much. And once again, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Yes, welcome to another great episode. As always, I'm your host Ashish, and you can catch me on Instagram and on Twitter at AshishAiri. I'm, of course, joined by my longtime friends and co-hosts. We've got Shahan at Shahan Jayaraja. We've got Dev at Superlaser. And we've got Ryan in the house. So we've got a full house. We got a fun, exciting draft today. All right. So election day is approaching quickly. So please get out there and vote. So we're like, all right, what's a fun topic? Why don't we draft our favorite presidents? All right. We're having a 4-round draft. Yes, we're drafting 16 presidents in this draft, and it's going to go down. I'm interested to see how this all pans out. But let me get this randomizer ready. I'm excited for it. What are you guys thinking going into this?
I really need the first pick because that's the only president I can actually speak to about. So I really need the first pick.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn about presidents here because I don't know about them, and Shahan will definitely inform us. And Ryan gets the fourth pick with that look on Ashish's face.
No, I mean, I won't lie. My anxiety's been creeping because we all know Shahan's like the history nerd. He knows the president so well. I'm worried, but let's see how this goes. So with the fourth pick, it's actually me that's choosing. I'm picking at fourth. At third, we've got Dev. At number 2, we've got Ryan.
Dang it!
Yes!
The number one pick.
Yes! Oh, man, I was really hoping I'd get the number 1 pick in this draft. Oh, man.
Dude, please leave Ryan's pick on the board.
I honestly,
this
if
is
I
payback
knew
for Chick-fil-A.
what the hell it could be, I might consider it, but I have no idea what direction Ryan would be going. Although, I will say, I assume it's this one. Number 1 pick in the president's draft, Abraham Lincoln. Easy pick. Like, I mean, come on. We don't need to overthink this pick, right? He ran for president to try to preserve the Union. He went into the Civil War. He freed the slaves. He helped set up, the 13th Amendment, freeing all the slaves. Like, come on. This is not close, right? Like, a lot of other presidents have done some really nice stuff, but Abraham Lincoln literally went and freed the slaves. And now, look, we can have conversations about some of the stuff that Lincoln, didn't accomplish. Like, interpersonally, he in our time would be considered obviously racist, right? There was not much thought by Abraham Lincoln that black people were actually equal to white people, right? Like, that was not a thought. But again, we can contextualize the times, right? Like, for his time. And for me, that's a big thing, right? Is like, we need to evaluate these people in their times, and in the context of his time, he was far and away. I mean, there's a reason that people still invoke his name today, and it's because, to me, he's the number 1 president.
Right. I think that throughout the whole draft, like, a lot of these presidents are going to do some horrible things, but part of it is going to be like where they were, their circumstances, how they were raised growing up, right? And you can't control for those factors. You can't just judge everybody by modern day standards. I think for the standard that he lived in, Abraham Lincoln, great pick.
Quick question though. He did free the slaves, but wasn't that for reasons other than actually giving them freedom? Wasn't it to preserve the Union or something else? Like, he was actually a slave owner himself, right?
No, he was not a slave owner.
Through his wife's estate, yes, technically. But also, it's a whole technicality. But yeah, he was technically a slave owner through his wife's estate.
Yeah, but so the deal is, right, like, that's the thing. I mean, we can argue whether or not Lincoln's intentions were the most pure, that he was actually just this perfect activist. No, of course not, right? Like, here's the thing that we're going to figure out, especially since we're going to be going through this draft. The thing that we're going to learn is that a lot of the presidents who did good things did them for dumb reasons, right? Like, not every single thing was, we had this great idea coming in and we're going to do everything the right way. And there's a pick that I'm going to make a little bit further on. Like, where I feel like a president accomplished a lot, and nobody would kind of consider him having done that.
I might take that pick. I think I know who you're gonna go for.
Well, that would fucking suck, but
We'll see what happens. I
Yeah.
think this is a clear 101 pick right here. I
easy.
mean, first of all, best memorial in DC, hands down, man. That is the best place to go to. Secondly, you got the Honest Abe thing going on. If you go inside, I think one of the buildings in DC as well has like a replica of his hands because those were massive. Like I said, the Honest Abe thing. I mean, my biggest issue with him is the act of the Moral Land Grant Act. You know why? That that created Texas A&M, guys. Thanks a lot, Abe. All right, that whole
Okay.
that's Abe's fault. Secondly, that also created Iowa State and Kansas State, who just recently whooped TCU in football the past 2 weeks. So I'm devastated by this pick, Shahan.
I mean, to be honest, if you're gonna be upset at anybody who created a university that whooped TCU, you're gonna be upset at a whole lot of people.
I want to shout out. He had a great neck beard. Gonna point that out.
Yeah,
That is disgusting. But no, real quickly before we move on to Ryan, read up on his backstory. Okay, on his way as a child, teenager, the way he grew up. I read about it, and it was the most magnificent thing of all time. Like, it's really inspiring and interesting. Well, that's a great pick. We've talked enough about that. Ryan, you've got the number 2 pick. Hopefully, your number 1 wasn't taken. What do you got here for us?
I want to preface all my picks before I make any picks. I'm not picking them based on what they did politically. I'm picking them just based on who I like and fun facts about them. So Shahan and Dev and Ashish can fill in the political parts and what they accomplished. But I'm prefacing this so you understand where I am coming from. And I actually did not even have Abraham Lincoln on my board. Just to put it that way.
Oh man!
It was not on my board. My number one pick, and I thought it was gonna be taking number 1, Barack Obama. Number 1. And I'll tell you why. I think arguably he is the best orator that was ever president. His speeches are just wonderful to listen to. The way he paces them and the way he talks, his inflection in his voice is magnificent. And he may be the only president that sang during his speech, sang Amazing Grace. He can sing. He can also play basketball. He can play basketball. And I think he's the only president that's done Barakatology. So for those reasons, and also he sent out a Nowruz message, which is Iranian New Year, and to Iranians, and that's unification of foreign countries. So I also like that about him. And his wife advocated exercising in children and kids. Turnip for what? Healthy eating. So for these reasons, I'm choosing Obama number 1.
I do want to be clear. I do want to be very clear. Yes, you are absolutely correct that, Gerald Ford did not sit in the Oval Office and do Barakatology. That is true. I can confirm that.
Right, and I thought we were drafting the presidents, but like if we're drafting like a basketball team, I think this is probably the number 1 pick. Like Abe Lincoln, basketball wasn't even invented, right? Like this kid's not hoop.
I disagree. Have you seen Abe's hands, dude? That guy's destroying.
Bro, the sport wasn't invented. Do you think this man can dribble a basketball?
I forgot one more thing. He's the first black president we had, the only one. So I'm gonna have the most diverse president draft.
So I do want to say, Obama was in my top 16 for sure, right? Like I expected him. He's on my board, right? Like 2 is ridiculous, right? 2 is insane. But I think for all of us, Barack Obama is a very inspirational figure. I think that for all of us, he was a great president. That we were happy to live through in a lot of ways. I'm excited that my first ever presidential vote was for Barack Obama. But again, I mean, like one of the things for me too, though, is that it's just too early to kind of judge his legacy. I mean, we've only been 4 years out, and obviously not been the best 4 years out. Like, the legacies to me also take, 10, 20 years before you can really start to understand. And, I think for me, again, living through Clinton, Bush, Obama, and now, obviously Obama stands apart, right? But like, for me, it's just too early to kind of have him truly in this like top 5 conversation.
Yeah, for me, I'm bamboozled out here. All right, I'm really confused here. I should have known after Ryan mentioned like Lincoln's beard trim or something. I'm like, what the hell? So I guess you're right. This is like a top 8 pick to me. He's like in the second round or something for me. Um, man, I really thought Shahan. I had money that Shahan was going to take Obama. All right, so I'm very flabbergasted.
What?
Bro, there's no way. With the number 1 pick, it was impossible.
No. But I thought he was going to take him like on
I
the
would
way.
have taken him later, but I probably would have taken him after you guys, though, too.
Yeah, but like he wouldn't have dropped to 8, I don't think.
No.
Yeah, you made some good points there, Ryan. It's someone we can relate to. He loves basketball, I guess, and clearly you love that too. So that's why he took him here. But I mean, let's be real. He did, send drones and killed hundreds of civilians, and that's on your pick, Ryan. So hope you feel good with that. But all right, so Dev, that puts you on the spot here. I mean, you know what? I'm just interested now into this draft, right? Like I was worried about the grilling. Now I'm just interested to see where Ryan goes, right? Like who is he choosing? Why is he choosing him? But let's see what happens. Dev.
Okay, so like I just didn't expect this person to like be on the board at this point, but like so I just have to take him. I'm gonna pick George Washington, right? If there was a Mount Rushmore of presidents, he would be on it, right? So this is a
troll level over 9,000.
Anyway, yeah. So I think when you talk about how consequential a president was, right? You look at Washington's farewell address. I think that's one of like the best speeches in U.S. history, right? I think it's very consequential. Washington obviously meant a lot to the country. I tend to like not like war generals personally, but obviously this country wouldn't exist without George Washington. So thank you, George Washington, and that's my pick.
And
well, I mean, it's cool and all that you love, the guy who brought us America, who brought us colonization. But, that's up to you.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, I mean, I think that's an obvious pick. I expected Washington to go number 2. And, I mean, he certainly is in the conversation for number 1, right? Like, I think that's easily. No, it's an obvious pick. I think it's going to pull well.
Always in the conversation for number 1. But yeah, if you're a fan of Wooden Teeth, George Washington is your guy. I'm actually scared right here. I have 3 favorite people. They're still on the board, and I have to choose 2 of them. I know I have to take one because I've studied him and I love him so much. So right here, I'm going to take someone that's, on the Mount Rushmore, and that is Teddy Roosevelt.
I knew it. I knew it.
I told Shahan this a while back. I was like, there's one president that I really want, and he forgot at the moment, but I was like, this is the one. All right, so I'm going to give a little background. This guy is spectacular from the beginning, all right? As a child, he dealt with like asthma and all these health issues. Doctors didn't have the solution. So what he did was like work twice as hard, physically exerted himself, and overcame his issues. And it was like, oh my God, this guy, at that point, I was like, I love this guy, all right? He went to Harvard. He did rowing and boxing, ended up like second place in a boxing tournament. Like I said, the guy had health issues and still did it. When he entered Harvard, his dad told him, first, check your morals, right? That needs to be number 1, then your health, then your studies. And I was like, that resonates with me. And he did the exact same thing. So let's talk about his political career. Obviously, man, if you just look up his history, he's a really interesting guy. First American to get a brown belt in judo. Okay. He's also he got a Medal of Honor for what he did in Cuba, leading the Rough Riders, volunteer cavalry, spectacular stuff. And his leadership there, really was amazing. That's why he won it. He also won the Nobel Peace Prize, and he was the first American to do that as well. Things that he did as president, I mean, obviously, he was a huge guy about breaking big trust, right? He's a trust buster. The dude was he's so interested as a kid into, environmental and conservation. The guy did a bunch of things. He created 5 national parks. He created 18 national monuments. He dedicated 100 million acres for national forests, So he's someone that was like trying to destroy monopolies in the railroad business. He did that. He's a man of the people, and he destroyed the beef trust. He added laws to kind of protect the food, drugs, and and meat. The labeling on there and make sure that they're doing good stuff there. So I mean, this guy is just spectacular. I could talk to him for a whole episode, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think what he did for the U.S., by the big stick ideology, right? Big stick energy, right? You feel me on that one? But yeah, overall, this guy is just so spectacular, and I'm glad I got him here.
I appreciate the pharmacy shout out with the food and drug labeling. Nice pharmacy shout out there. And also, I like his name, Teddy. I like teddy bears, so Teddy. I like
Okay,
that.
I'm going to take that from you right there. Teddy bears are named after him, straight up. He was in a forest. Some guys found like a loose bear because he hadn't seen one all day. They tied up the bear and were like, "Hey, Teddy, you can shoot him." And Teddy's like, "Nah, man, that's not cool, right? Like, if I'm going to shoot a bear, I have to like, actually hunt it, right? I'm not just going to shoot like a plain ass tied up one." So someone selling teddy bears like in the same store in the same city was like, "Here are two bears, and we're going to call them teddy bears." And that's how teddy bears came about. So what's up? Teddy bears, Teddy Roosevelt. That's why I should win this draft. What's up?
All right. Well, you talked a lot about his like great accomplishments, but this guy did split the political party and cost his party an election. So
I mean,
but Bull Moose Party is a great name for a party. We should bring back a party named the Bull Moose Party.
So Teddy's kind of interesting, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's first of all, he's a great president, like legit sort of top 5, that sort of president, right? And in terms of like modern day presidents, like in terms of post 1900, he was really consequential in terms of bringing the end of the Gilded Age was a big thing. He was a big thing, like Ashish mentioned, in terms of like natural development and national parks and all that sort of stuff. Look, his big terrible thing was obviously being terrible on native issues, which guess what? All of them are, right? So like, that's not something that you hold against him too much. You do hold against him too much, but in the context of this draft, obviously, you have to have context. I mean, and obviously, in terms of doing a draft like this, obviously, like Ashish said, he's got like a lot of like the storytelling things, like a Washington, for example, where it's not like part of his actual presidential legacy, but it does make it a stronger pick to just have that.
Yeah, for sure. Without him, you don't get the Grand Canyon. But that's the point. Like, I fell in love with him as a person first, and then I was like, okay, his political career was pretty good too, and that's why I had to take him here. Going to my second pick, man, I'm worried. Oh, man, you know what? I'm going to double down on Roosevelt here. I'm going to take FDR.
Oh,
no.
I was shocked it was slipping this far, honestly.
Yeah.
I will tell you guys later who the third person was, but man, FDR, another fantastic person. Really, really just like the Roosevelt name. He's keeping it up there, He tackled corruption as a New York governor. Obviously, he dealt with like a lot of physical issues too, like being paralyzed from the waist down and being in a wheelchair. But like, he's the longest serving president for a reason. People loved him. You're talking about a president that's entering a time after the Great Depression, right? Like, shit is horrible, and his years made the most of it. Okay. You're talking about a guy who's coming off of Great Depression, going into World War II, yet still had like people still loved him afterwards, right? Like, he ran for such a long time and broke the laws really because you're not allowed to. But
no, that wasn't a law when he did it.
They made it after, right?
Yeah.
The George Washington.
But it was the farewell address, right?
Exactly. They said you should only run for 2, so technically he's pushing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But man, this guy did so great. I mean, you want to talk about some things he did? He made unemployment go from 25% to 2%. He created these acts to really help the American people. People were jobless, looking for jobs, and he did his best doing that. He created the Emergency Banking Act, which brought stability and defended the bank runs that were happening that led to the Depression. The Glass-Steagall Act, with the FDIC, right? He restored trust in American banking. The New Deal, which created like FERA, CCC, AAA, PWA, and TVA. Like, all these things were foundational things to create jobs for people, or like create dams and just get people working and trying to like bring the whole country from like the shitty position to a position of like prosperity. And I think he did that. And like I said, it's such a shitty time, and he did his best. And I think he's a spectacular president. So I'm glad to get him here.
The interesting part is you never mentioned one of the biggest things that he faced, which was polio. That's why he was paralyzed, but he never mentioned that. That's something he's actually kind of known for, because he got polio, and that's why he was paralyzed. So I want to mention that. That's courage to like be president and be facing a disease like that.
Right. I think he got it before he was like New York governor too, but also he was a chain smoker too. So he dealt with a lot of other health issues down the road. But yeah, I mean, he brought in the social security system, which was security for the elderly, the sick, the poor people. He established a national minimum wage, right? Something that we're still dealing with. We're like, bro, the minimum wage doesn't increase. But like this guy was like, hey, people need a minimum wage. He did that. He created the Housing Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and he also put in the first federal action to prohibit employment discrimination. And hey, bro, guess what? He also won World War II with the Allied coalition. So I mean, this guy, bring it. I mean, I love it. I love having double downing on Roosevelt here.
So here's the one thing that I'll say, right? Like I think that it's absolutely fair to say that FDR probably in terms of like bureaucracy and planning and government action is the greatest like president from that perspective of all time. And I don't think it's really that close, right? Mm-hmm. The two things that I'll say that are sort of legacy things that have obviously aged pretty poorly: Japanese internment, right? Just horrific stuff. And the other thing too is that a lot of the New Deal plans excluded black workers. Now, the reason for that is because they needed to pass it, and so the only way you could get it passed was basically like we're going to unofficially exclude these people, right? But at the same time, obviously, I think it's helped set a policy agenda that really helped take America forward. And even now, I mean, we're obviously having some of these fights. There's a reason why, some of these more progressive, more left candidates are embracing the symbolism of the New Deal. And that's because of how significant it was in sort of bringing American work back. And so, no, I mean, again, another one, clearly a top 5 president. I mean, I think that for me, I probably would have even picked him third, probably, if not second. So I think easy choice.
Thanks, Shahan. And from now on, I have my two of my 3 favorite picks. I feel so good, right? Like Shahan's out here supporting my president, and I feel like that's just so much relief. When Shahan's out here supporting your picks, it feels good. So, all right, let's move along. Dev, you're back on the board. Second pick. What do you got?
All right, well, I guess I'll just finish off Mount Rushmore. So let's get Thomas Jefferson. I think there's a lot of problems with Thomas Jefferson, but we're just going to talk about, look, if I was going to pick, presidents who weren't slave owners, I'm going to have to limit a lot of my presidential picks, right? I definitely think it's like a shitty thing, but, we're talking about someone who lived in the 1800s, early 1800s, late 1700s, right? This is a completely different era. When we talk about, obviously, a lot of his notable accomplishments happened before his presidency. We're just talking about, writing the Declaration of Independence, religious freedom being a big thing that he pushed for. So, yeah, I think he's a good pick. Obviously, he's on Mount Rushmore, so I think when that was created, people considered him a top 4 president. So hopefully he'll continue to give me some votes.
I love it. That was the third one I considered. I think Jefferson's a great pick. Now you have 2 on Mount Rushmore. That's why I debated, dude. I was like, I have Teddy. Should I go with Jefferson? But man, when you talk about Jefferson, the third president overall, John Adams.
Third time's the charm.
We'll leave it. Yeah, but this guy did great things, right? We're in trouble with France. He's like, you know what? Hey, Louisiana Purchase. Let's settle everything. He doubled the country, right? You didn't even mention all the great things he did. The Louisiana Purchase is amazing, right? That led to the exploration of Lewis and Clark that we've heard of, growing up, right? He drafted the Virginia Statute for religious freedom, and these are amazing things that he did. And I think he's an incredible president too. But one last thing, he also abolished slave trade. So, hey, shout out to you, Jefferson.
So the thing that you say about Jefferson, right? Obviously the Louisiana Purchase is the headlining thing. And I do think it was an inevitability, right? It was already colonized land. It wasn't like it was a choice between we're just gonna leave this for the people, or it happened, right? It was already, we were already moving that direction. So I don't view it as a negative, in the context of American history. But the big thing that you say actually about Thomas Jefferson is obviously George Washington was, sort of the critical president for setting norms of the U.S. Mm-hmm. Well, Jefferson was the guy who really reinforced those norms, in terms of how the U.S. was going to act in terms of banking, how the U.S. was going to act in terms of military might, right? He really reduced the military and was much more specific about how he deployed the military, right? Like he was, again, and I think that when we look at sort of how America's presidency has grown, like Jefferson ends up being one of the most crucial presidents that we have from that perspective.
Sorry, and he had the great line in the second line: "All men are created equal." At the time, women,
including the slaves I'm raping.
Yeah, except all those other men.
We talked about there's levels to this, but like the statement is there, right? This is the third president overall saying all men are created equal, and I think somehow we forgot that over so many years. But nice pick. So that puts Ryan back up. Oh, where's he going?
Well, this is easy for me because my number 2 pick is still on the board. And I'm picking President John F. Kennedy with my number 2 pick, aka JFK. I think he has undoubtedly the most iconic quote ever said by a president. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And secondly, I think arguably he's the best looking president we've ever had. And thirdly,
he's not even the best looking president on your board.
Arguably, arguably, depends which direction you go.
Listen, we don't need this Eurocentric beauty standard bullshit.
And thirdly, he won a Pulitzer Prize for a book he wrote, which I like reading books, so I like that about him. And lastly,
have you read that book?
No, I haven't, but and lastly, I respect someone who took a bullet for this country. And he went to a hospital that I have stepped foot in, and I have done part of a rotation at in Parkland. So for those reasons, I'm choosing JFK as my second pick.
Took a bullet, it sort of implies that like he withstood a bullet.
Yeah. Well, I think took a bullet would like also imply that like it was like him jumping in the way of someone else to like save a life or something,
Well, he died for this country, okay.
I don't think he died for this country. I think he died because someone crazy decided to murder him.
Also because he had like pretty questionable backgrounds, to be honest. I heard a lot of mob talk. I know he's tight with Frank Sinatra. He cut out some deal where Frank Sinatra's performing at this famous club every Friday night because they're like, hey, vote for Kennedy and whatever. And man, there's a lot of questionable things. I like JFK. I think this is actually a good pick. I was really worried where you're going. He also, like, the worst thing is when people think about Dallas, like, JFK died there.
This kind of sucks for me, like me having to go here, because I actually feel like I have to defend your pick now, because I expected them to go a little bit more positive and then I could jump in. But like that's not really what happened. JFK was obviously, in terms of like the intangible stuff that we talk about with like a Washington and a Jefferson and a Lincoln, like JFK was big from that perspective. He was a very hopeful president. He kind of helped set the agenda for the 60s moving along and stuff like that. And from that perspective, he was very consequential. Now, what I wanted to say, but again, I expected the talk to be a little bit more positive, was that I was going to transition right into my pick. And the reason for that is because you take JFK and all the things that people ascribe to him. This is the guy who actually got it done. LBJ with my next pick. So here's the deal, right? LBJ, not seen as a very popular president, but you go back and look at his accomplishments. He was one of the most accomplished presidents in American history. Like, he has 4 pieces of legislation that could have been number 1 for anybody else, right? The Civil Rights Act, right? One of the most consequential pieces of legislation of all time. The Voting Rights Act, something that we're still fighting today, and he was pushing through in 1965. The Great Society programs with Medicare and Medicaid, right? These are things that if any one president had passed any of these things would get them into the top 10. But because of Vietnam, he doesn't get remembered. And here's the thing too, right? You want to hear about what happened wrong with Vietnam. JFK is the primary catalyst behind things going wrong with Vietnam. We were already too intertwined by that point by the time that LBJ came in. And regardless, like, because he wasn't sort of the same inspirational figure, people blamed LBJ for all the bad stuff that happened with it. And, we're just like, well, obviously JFK would have handled this differently, even though obviously he wouldn't have fucking done it because we actually got to see what he would have done, right? So, so look, if LBJ had the persona of JFK, I think that he'd be remembered as like a top 5-ish president. But here's the deal, right? Like, LBJ was seen as a jerk. He was seen as somebody who was very rude to work with, very difficult to work with, very sort of cutthroat, right? Like, he wasn't seen as like this great inspirational figure like a JFK was. And look, sometimes that's what you need to get things done in Washington. And that's why I think LBJ is one of our most consequential presidents, even though he'll never get credit for being that.
Yeah, who's like tough to work with? Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. Like, these are like, a lot of great people can be tough to work with, right? I don't hold that against him. What I do hold against him is having the worst freaking highway in Dallas. Okay, 635 sucks. All right, get out of here, LBJ.
I was going to mention that. I like 635, but that's just me. And his name, but also he shares the same initials as LeBron James, which is arguably the GOAT of basketball. So he gets brownie points for that.
All you guys could take from him to make shots. Again, you look at really the progress of our nation, right? Like, FDR was really the first guy who sort of set things along that way of, who kind of instilled the idea that America should take care of its citizens, right? Like, that he was the first one to really push for that. And LBJ was the one who kind of made that permanent, right? With the Great Society programs. And for example, I mean, if you like the idea of government healthcare, who really brought that to us was LBJ. And the other thing too, again, like, we can't just gloss over the fact that in 1960, again, with the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, right? Like, those are two of the most consequential pieces of legislation in American history when it comes to racial relations. Like, you talk about, if you look at my board, right, my number 1 and number 2 with Lincoln and LBJ, I would say that there is a really good case that they are the 2 presidents in terms of legislation who most pushed for civil rights, right? Who were most consequential in trying to bring equal rights for all. And again, like, we don't know whether Lincoln was sitting in his spare room being like, oh man, I like black people, right? And same with LBJ. We don't know. But all we know for certain is that they passed some of the most consequential legislation and created some of the most consequential acts that we'll ever see on that issue.
Yep. No, I think he's a great pick. There's some good, there's some bad, I think. And like Dev mentioned, maybe living in Dallas, you're just like, oh, fuck, Lyndon B. Johnson. Oh, man, I don't want to remember that
shit. This is actually just a joke.
But there's something when I think of his name, I'm just like, nah, I don't really like the guy. But you're right. He did pass some very important things.
If he was young and if he was articulate and all this sort of stuff, right? Like, we'd remember him differently than sort of being like this sort of guy who from Texas who was cutthroat, but again, like, there's other presidents. Like, I don't expect that Jimmy Carter is going to get picked, and Jimmy Carter seems like a fantastic person. He was also one of our least successful presidents, right? Like, I would obviously much rather hang out with Jimmy Carter than LBJ, but there's a clear better president among them, and that's kind of the issue.
Nice. Well, I think you have your third pick right here too, right, Sean?
I do, and I don't like this spot at all, if I'm being perfectly honest. I just feel like I have to make a decision now that's going to be like I don't feel like there's an obvious next choice, And so for me, I think the direction I'm going to go is with Eisenhower.
No!
Did I take it back?
That's 2 of them. You can't just take all the civil rights leaders. Like, this isn't fair.
So, interesting story about Eisenhower, right? Eisenhower was general during World War II, right? He was one of the most consequential leaders in World War II. That's not part of the presidency per se, but it's context. And actually, in 1952, there was talk that, and I don't know whether this is sort of urban legend or if this is sort of what happened, but actually both the Democrat and Republican Party both actually approached him to run for president in their party because he was so universally popular. So for somebody like me who obviously likes the idea of bipartisanship, likes the idea of having these conversations, like, Eisenhower was really an influential president from that perspective. Now, obviously, like, we live in a completely different world at this point where that's not possible. But at the time, he was a very popular president, both among Democrats and Republicans. One of the big things was he ended the Korean War. Even though he was a general, one of the great things about Eisenhower is that because he was a general and a military leader, he understood how difficult and dangerous war was, right? So he really helped set the stage for America to be at peace for most of his 8 years in office. Now, there were some early Vietnam stuff that unfortunately did spiral, obviously. but another thing that Eisenhower was the one who actually created the national highway system. Eisenhower also continued of the New Deal programs, and you look at the 50s as a period of unprecedented economic prosperity, and there's a lot of context around that in terms of like Europe being bombed and all that sort of stuff. But he did preside over that. Like people don't realize, like, the top marginal tax rate in the 50s was like in the 80s and 90s, right? Like this was a time when people thought that we are prosperous, but we need to be prosperous together. We need to do these giant programs that nobody's ever thought of. And so again, like, he was not an especially polarizing president, and that's why he's not especially, he's not somebody that people remember as much. But in a lot of ways, I think that Eisenhower is a model for how a modern American president should be.
If I'm not mistaken, Eisenhower also created NASA to help compete with Sputnik from Russia. I was reading that earlier. And also, a thing I like about Eisenhower is that his nickname is Ike. And I like the name Ike, and I like playing with Ike on Super Smash Brothers. And my dad also
would.
My dad some for a little bit when he was in college went by the name Ike because his first name was too hard to pronounce.
And that's what. Back to Ryan. Ryan, what do you got for us, buddy?
I am very curious to see what happens next.
So my next pick is Harry S. Truman. I like the Truman Show, and his name is Truman.
God, the first thing that you say.
Secondly, he got us through the Cold War semi-peacefully. And third, correct me if I'm wrong. Third, his middle name initial is S, and actually doesn't stand for anything. Fun fact. I really like that. He has this.
Wait, so his middle name is just S?
Yes, and it doesn't stand for anything. And then lastly, he's the only president without a college education, which means everybody that's watching, you can be president too. You just need to work hard. You can do whatever you want without working hard, and he's a testament to that. With hard work, you can reach for the stars. And for these reasons, I pick Harry S. Truman with my third pick.
Oh my God.
The S stands for stupid because you're dropping the stupidest reasons of what
I want to jump in and just clarify that there are actually good reasons to pick Harry Truman. The biggest reason is the Marshall Plan after World War II, which the U.S. basically became a manufacturing hub to rebuild Europe, basically, right? And so, like, the U.S. is the reason, first of all, that Europe was kind of rebuilt, and also that brought an era of prosperity to the U.S. because it became a manufacturing center. And so you look at actually a lot of the good of Eisenhower's presidency economically, it's because of policy set forth during Truman's presidency. Now, again, I mean, maybe that's not as cool as having the middle name S, but I think it's pretty good.
This is someone I did consider around the third round. He did do some good things. The peacefully ending, that was lies. Hundreds of thousands of people died. So good job, Ryan.
The Korean War, we just got to throw that in there too. But that was completely wrong. But everything else, was a fair point.
Well, all right, Dev, what do you got for us?
All right, B. Hayes. Okay.
Rutherford.
Yeah, I'm gonna call him B. Hayes. All right, and so after I was like, okay, let me see who this guy is, right? I just did a quick little Google search for B. Hayes. Turns out he was an abolitionist who defended refugee slaves. Like, pretty. Thank you for defending the slaves. Or like defending the slaves against tyranny, basically. And good guy. I like that.
Okay, I'm about to shit all over this thing. Okay, so so in 1876, the Electoral College is so close that they basically can't determine who became president, right? This is Hayes' election. So in that stead, Rutherford B. Hayes was a Republican. They basically said, okay, look, we will... if we're allowed to become president, we will end Reconstruction. We will pull all of the federal troops out of the South, and basically it'll be the honor system after that for the South. You might have heard, for example, that back in the late 60s, early 70s, we had black people elected as senators and congressmen. We had black people, have a great output for voting. And all of a sudden that changed. And the reason that changed was because of the election of 1876 and the agreement to pull troops out of the South. So you actually look at, why does the South take so long to integrate black people back in? Rutherford B. Hayes is why. Where's Ryan going to go with his fourth pick, my guy?
We'll find out.
But all right, so I got two back-to-back picks here. My last picks, third and fourth. I still have three candidates I really like in this area. So you know what? I'm just going to go with my gut here. So with my third pick, I'm going to take Ulysses S. Grant.
Damn it. I thought that he was going to drop to me. Oh, man. So everything that I just said about Hayes, the opposite is what Ashish just picked.
Right. Yeah. And, I figured in case I miss on Honest Abe, who's the president, I'm going to take the guy who's like leading the whole army to victory, right, for the Union. He was also the lieutenant during the Mexican-American War. You've got, we got $1 bills, we got $5 bills. My guy's on the $50 bill. Fantastic. Okay. He also he had like a federal enforcement for civil rights as well. And I don't have too much about him, but I was like, this is a great counter pick to Abe Lincoln if I missed him. And I think he had a pretty good career. His political career might not have been as great as other presidents, but with what he was working with, right, it was a bad time at that time. So he's just kind of like reconstructing it as well. And I think he did a great job.
Yeah. So the thing is, right, like I mentioned with LBJ, in terms of like his personality taking away from what he accomplished as president, I think that's very much true of Grant too. So Grant, again, he was the first president, I believe, elected after Andrew Johnson, who was a disaster during Reconstruction. And he was really one of our most effective presidents when it came to Reconstruction. He sent troops into the South. He enforced civil rights. And again, like I mentioned, when I was shitting all over Dev's pick, like, you see all of a sudden senators and congressmen, like you hear all these things in terms of modern day, in terms of like, this is the first since Reconstruction, right? And the reason that you hear that is because black people were actually starting to get the rights to vote. They're starting to get, not equal treatment under the law, but better treatment under the law. They're having the right to vote, all this sort of stuff, right? And like, then we have this giant backslide, that culminates really in the 1930s, right? Like that's one of the darkest areas to be black in American history. And so, no, I think that Grant's somebody who gets underrated a whole lot because he was a bit of an alcoholic. He wasn't very nice to deal with, but like again, on the same sort of on the same wavelength as LBJ, I just think that he's become a dramatically underrated president.
Yeah, and I mean under him the Department of Justice was formed, right? And he also created the first national park, and that was Yellowstone. So hey, another national park fellow over here. So I'm gonna end my draft here.
And by the way, you better pick somebody shitty now because I'm pissed that all three of your picks have been good.
Hey, I said I did my research. I'll show you guys the research after, but man, I'm excited for this. We'll talk about some honorable mentions and some disastrous ones maybe, but for my fourth pick here, I'm going to end with James Polk. The 11th president, this guy, all right, served only one term. He was like one of the most effective and most efficient presidents of all time. He went into presidency when we're voting for presidents, we're like, hey, just stick to your word. Whatever you say, get it done. That's what he did. He had four things going into presidency. He was like, hey, I'm going to get four things done that I have written down here. I'm going to talk about them real quick. The reduction of tariffs, the reestablishment of the independent treasury system, acquiring the Oregon country, and acquiring California and New Mexico. Those were his four goals going into his presidency. He accomplished all four. And so that's the reason I took him, to be honest. He's just very effective, very efficient, and I think that's what we want in a leader. He led the U.S. during the Mexican-American War. He also helped when Texas got annexed, and hey, we all live in Texas. He actually I think signed the papers that made him Texas the 20th state of the U.S. So yeah, I mean the only reason I'm taking here is, like I said, very efficient, very effective.
Yeah, I'm honestly very pissed that your draft went as well as it did. So Polk is interesting, right? He's definitely we talk about these top tier presidents. He's not one of those, right? Like he's not one of the we're drafting we're at 13 right now, right? Like we're getting down there a little bit, but the thing that Polk did was that, like Ashish kind of alluded to, he said, I'm going to accomplish these things as president, did all of them, and then was just like, I'm done. I did it. Like, I did everything I said I was going to do. Now, the one really bad thing was the Mexican-American War, but, like, it was 1800s, what you're supposed to do, right? So, but all in all, I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I'm very pissed about how
So-
well you got.
So I just want to give a shout out to the boy, James Polk, because without him, we would not be living in a city named Dallas. His vice president is who the city Dallas was named after.
Sweet. See, look at that. I mean, we got a lot of things going on here. And hey, you know what? This is probably the first time in the history of this podcast Shahan's like upset with my picks, and and I feel very good right now. I just feel so content. So I just want to throw that out there.
Listen, now that I've dubbed it a good draft, you're gonna get last. I promise you. This is just how this is gonna work. I've been here before.
Oh well, shit. Well, all right, let's end this draft, guys. So throw back to Dev for your last pick.
All right. Well, I'm gonna pick this guy off his name only, and I know that what I'm picking him for, the Hoover Dam, was accomplished under FDR. However, he was a big part of the reason it was accomplished. That's why it's named after him. And I'm gonna pick Hoover because I think, like, hey, getting a bunch of people together, getting them jobs, bringing water to a bunch of areas across the country. I think that's a pretty cool thing, and generates electricity. And like I said, if you're gonna build something, at least make it a tourist attraction. And look, this guy he accomplished all of those things, and that's why I'm gonna pick him.
So I'm curious. Have you heard of the Great Depression?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I know what happened. But like, was the dam named after the Great Depression? Didn't think so. Named after Hoover.
I mean, it's a giant hole in the earth. What is that if not a Great Depression? I don't know, man. This is. I mean, I believe that that Hoover was the guy who FDR ran against in 1932, right? And it was just like a catastrophic disaster how poorly he did, if I remember right. I'm trying to pull it up right now. Just yeah, he did. He won 39.7% of the votes. Only states that he won were Pennsylvania, Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Delaware. That's
all right. Yeah, but if you're in the 30s and the South isn't voting for you, that's like a big positive.
I think Dev took a great president because without his president screwing everything up, FDR would have been this great.
Exactly. I just laying the groundwork here.
Yeah, I mean you're tossing up the ball for me, and I'm slam dunking. So thank you for that pick. And I think there's a vacuum called Hoover, so I'm sure Azadi likes that pick too.
Yeah, it's called Hoover because he sucked.
That was really good, Sean. I agree. Yes, love it. So this goes to Ryan. Your last pick for us. What do you got?
Oh man, I'm torn between three presidents.
Did I steal your pick there?
But I have to go. My number 3 pick is still on the board, so I'm gonna have to go with my number 3 pick.
3 times?
And I just can't leave him off this draft because he played a big part of my life for 8 years. I have to pick George W. Bush.
Oh my God! What are you doing? Oh, what is happening?
Wait. I'm so flustered here. First of all, you said your 3rd pick was still there. This is your 4th pick, Ryan. But you also took George W. Bush and Obama?
No, I knew nobody was taking George W. Bush.
You're right.
So I waited at the end. Okay.
Oh, no.
I like George W. Bush because he was so down to earth. He was from Texas. He went to Yale and he made C's and he became president. So I have 2 presidents that you just need to work hard and you can achieve your goals.
He became president because his daddy helped him become president.
We're not talking about that part, okay? But we're not talking about that part. He helped us get through one of the toughest tragedies America ever faced, 9/11. He stood there with courage and integrity and helped us fight that and prosper through that. And, he brought humor in his speeches when we needed it most. And for that, I can't thank him enough. And I don't know what the W in George W. Bush stands for.
Walker.
But it stands for Wassom.
I was having a conversation actually the other day among some of my friends who are sort of politically active, and we were trying to talk about like the most consequential elections, right? Like the ones that like if they had changed just a little different, right? Like everything could have been different. And the biggest one that came up was Dev's boy Rutherford B. Hayes, because we might have had black people having the right to vote in the South earlier, but we all agreed 2000. If Al Gore is president over George W. Bush, everything is different right now. Okay. Like the point is, right? Like we get into endless wars. The biggest thing, I think actually the most consequential thing is think about Al Gore versus George W. Bush on climate policy. Like it is just completely different world, right? Like completely different worlds. But yeah. Actually, do you guys have anything else to add on W?
No, like you said, I'm just shocked here. I mean, you're taking George W. Bush, you got Obama. We're talking about nepotism. You like the whole Bush family. You also got all the Kennedys up in the government.
Okay.
I mean, like
when we're talking about it though, right? George W. Bush Turnpike is way better than 635.
Thank you. Thank you, Dev. Thank you.
Really, like, who's got the egg on their head now?
The best highway in this draft. Thank you. I need the optimism.
So this pick is really hard. I don't think that there's like a great answer here, right? Like I don't think that there's like an obvious like I was really hoping that Grant would fall to me. That was the one that I thought that maybe people would be like, oh, he's an alcoholic, but like no. I mean, Ashish did too much research for this one, unfortunately. But so I'm just. So this is one that's aged interestingly, right? Like has aged a little controversially, but I'm going to try to contextualize this in the time that it happened. Bill Clinton. So here's the deal on Clinton, right? Like we can talk about what's happened in the 30 years since then, right? Like that's a whole other conversation. We can talk about some of the things that he did backfiring, right? But like at the time, Clinton was one of our more effective presidents that we've had in modern history, right? So the way that he ran was kind of like I was talking about with Eisenhower, right? Like he kind of was that guy who tied the South and the North together, right? In a lot of ways, because he was like this intellectual, really smart, really liked governor from the South, from Arkansas, who managed to make his way to Washington. And, you talk about inspirational stories, like Bill Clinton was just kind of a guy. Like his family was nothing special. And especially in this era, to kind of go from that to where he did so quickly. I mean, he really was kind of a genius, right? Like that's kind of how he rose so quickly, was that people talked to him and heard him speak and heard about sort of how good a politician he was. And while he was president, I mean, I think that the 90s truly is, one of the better times in modern American history, right? Like we didn't have wars going on so much, right? Like the economy was very good. There were things that we were sort of hurtling towards, but like at the same time, I think that for that era, he was very good. And I mean, like obviously the big thing that I will 100% point out that's aged poorly is the crime bill, right? Like that's really the big thing that.
Yeah, I was gonna say you said no wars, but there's certainly one war that he's responsible for.
And so I mean, and the thing is, right? Like again, when you talk about the context of the times, like there's a reason that older people don't hold the crime bill against Joe Biden, and it's because they were there, right? Like everybody supported it at the time. That's what everybody wanted, and then obviously it just went fucking terrible, right? Like I think we can all agree on that. But in a lot of ways, I think that Clinton ended up being a very consequential president. And again, like I think that if Al Gore becomes president instead of George W. Bush, like we're looking at him as like setting the table for the future of American politics in a lot of ways. And unfortunately that didn't happen. And we have all this bullshit where everything bad is Hillary's fault. And we just all this bullshit, right? Like we can get into it some other time. But I think that for his time, even for example, right? Like he was very aggressive early in his presidency and trying to push healthcare for all and stuff like that, right? So there's a lot of things that I think that he did well. And again, I mean, I think that people get distracted because of the scandal at the end, which, I mean, look, that's not top 10 things I'm most worried about in a presidency, whether he's, having sex with interns. But like, at the end of the day, I think that for his time, I think he was a very consequential president.
All right. So there are two things that I do want to say in defense of Clinton, right? Like, one, crime across the entire Western world was like absurdly high in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
This is a trend across, like, it wasn't an American thing. It wasn't specifically isolated to us. And like, while I disagree, like, and obviously with hindsight, we know the approach was wrong. Like, look, this was a problem that just had to be dealt with. And the second thing is that I believe in August, August of 91, Clinton was polling at 3% in the Democratic primaries. And this man was like a true underdog story to come in and win the primary and get it. And I think that's cool. And I think that's kind of inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, in the modern era, right? Like, I think that in a lot of ways, we're kind of in a second Gilded Age, right? Where like there's sort of these elites or whatever, and like they kind of have more power and they have easier access. And I think that it's really inspirational that not only that Bill Clinton worked his way up on his own, but also that he did it from Arkansas. He didn't sort of say, I'm going to move to Washington, become a lobbyist or something like that. Like, he was on the ground in Arkansas up until 1992. And I give him a lot of credit for that. I think that, again, the Clintons' legacy is obviously going to be complicated for a variety of reasons. But I do think that one of the reasons that they became so controversial and so kind of attacked in the way that they were is because they were so effective, right? Like, that's why you hear all this stuff about them going after them personally, because like, as politicians, like, everybody was kind of on board.
Tate, let's just go around. Just, you don't need to explain anything. Just name your four in case people just want to skip to this. And if there's someone you still had in mind, like on your list, or someone you wanted someone else to take so you could roast like the shit out of them. We'll start with you, Dev.
All right. So I picked Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. I didn't pick in the next two rounds.
And just to be clear, the two people who Dev picked were Mr. Great Depression himself, Herbert Hoover, and also Mr. Black People Shouldn't Have Rights, Rutherford B. Hayes.
Yeah, but Mr. Damn named after him.
All right. Well, Ryan, how about you explain your fun draft you got going on?
I picked Obama number one, the only black president. If you're speaking about civil rights, that's probably one of the biggest things, we need to allude to over there. And then I picked JFK. I picked JFK with the most iconic quote in the history of presidents. And then followed by Harry S. Truman. Great show, Truman Show. Watch it, or movie, watch it. Jim Carrey if you haven't. And then goes with George W. Bush, the man who got us through 9/11.
Does the Truman Show has nothing to do with Truman, right?
But that's his name. And it's a great movie.
Okay, that's what I thought. It is a great movie, but like, what?
Movie, but no.
And then I had two honorable mentions, which are the other two picks I was thinking about in that third slot. First one was Ronald Reagan. I just like that. That's why I didn't pick him. But I like him because he was a movie star. He was a sports figure, and then he became president.
Pick Arnold Schwarzenegger too.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
He would have been a better pick.
And then he helped destigmatize the use of hearing aids because he had to use one because of age-related hearing loss. And I appreciate that for those like myself that are hard of hearing. He helped bring hearing aids into the forefront of the public eye. My second pick that I was toying to was Taft, President Taft, because I appreciate he likes bathtubs and he got stuck in a bathtub and he pulled him out.
That's not why he's good.
And after he finished presidency, he lost 70 pounds. So thank you, bathtub, for motivating him.
He is admittedly the only president who later became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
One of the only presidents who likes taking baths. So
yeah. Also, didn't let Teddy Roosevelt get his due.
Well, we'll get back to that. Hey, Shahan, how about you go over yours real quick?
Yeah, I just must mention, I'm going to go ahead and do my people who I would have shitted on first. So Reagan, yes, I am very glad that he helped, bring light to hearing aids and stuff. I wish that he would have brought light to like the AIDS epidemic or like, the crack epidemic or, like.
Wait, what do you mean bring light to it? He created it. What light do you need?
It would have been so the thing that I've said about Reagan before is I'm pretty sure that if you go through continent by continent, every single continent except for Antarctica is worse off because of Ronald Reagan's presidency, including America. So,
Wait,
cool.
he probably was anti-science, so Antarctica's probably worse off for him too.
That's true. That's actually true. He reversed a lot of he reversed a lot of Carter's environmental policy. So
yeah, there. So literally, Antarctica's also worse
all
off.
7 continents. So anyway, to get to mine real quick, Abraham Lincoln with my first pick, obvious number 1 pick. Second up, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Number 3, Dwight David Eisenhower. Number 4, Bill Clinton. The one who this is like the person who I feel like has far and away been the best ex-president, right? Like, this is not based on what he accomplished while he was in office, because he kind of struggled. Jimmy Carter is like the coolest dude imaginable, and it's a good reminder that being awesome doesn't mean that you're going to be a good president. And for example, LBJ is a good example that not being awesome doesn't mean you're not going to be a great president. So shout out to Jimmy Carter, great guy. He actually won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. Years and years after he was president, was huge in a lot of peace accords and stuff like that. But unfortunately, not the best domestic president that we've ever had. But shout out to you, Jimmy Carter. We still love you.
Yeah, no, great draft there. One thing I forgot to mention about Clinton. I mean, without him, we don't get the meme of him listening to 4 records, and we put our 4 favorite records, and is a thing during this epidemic. It was a big thing, and we were talking about basketball players. Obama's a good one. Abe Lincoln. Let's be real. George Bush dodged a shoe going his way. That coordination, A+.
Yeah,
all right, that's
true.
S tier. That's S tier coordination.
Yeah, if we have a basketball draft, like I think Ryan's getting us.
I think yeah. But Shahan does have LBJ on his team, so that's gonna be hard to.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. I'll go over mine real quick. I felt very good with it. I doubled down with Roosevelt to start off the draft. Teddy Roosevelt, someone I really admire and really respect as a human too, before he went to politics. But then we got FDR, did amazing things. I ended up with Ulysses S. Grant, also did amazing things. And I ended with James Polk, who also did amazing things. So I feel really happy about my draft. The one I almost considered with my last pick was William Taft. Not because of the bathtub thing, because that ruins his name. When you think of him, you're like, oh, that guy got stuck in a bathtub. But it's like, no, like Shahan mentioned, he did become a Supreme Court justice after his presidency, the only one to do so. He was president, and he was the Secretary of War under Teddy Roosevelt. I was going to double down in case I missed on Teddy. Actually, I was going to take Taft because they started off on the same path and kind of split ways afterwards. But he's a super big antitrust guy as well, and even won more cases than Teddy did in his presidency. So that was really cool. As for presidents, I'd shit on if you've taken them. Reagan. Shahan touched on that. Like, a lot of the issues we face today is because of Reagan. Outside of the crack epidemic, the AIDS epidemic, he raised national debt through the roof, right? He created he started supplying weapons and all this shit, man. Like, oh my God, I kind of wish he chose him, but we were running late anyway, so thanks, Ryan. The other one was Jackson. If someone took him, I'd rage. And the last one would be John Adams. Jefferson actually undid a lot of the shitting that he did, so that was a good pick, Dev. But yeah,
stumble into some greatness.
Yeah, exactly. But hey, if you lasted this long, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Let us know who your favorite presidents are and who your least favorite ones are too. We're interested. And as always, thanks again for listening. We appreciate it so much. And until next time, we're out. See ya.